Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring Dr. J.H. Tilton's highly controversial 1900 publication. This is a guy who completely and radically rejected mainstream medicine in favor of lifestyle-based, non-drug and non-surgical healing. We're talking about the turn of the 20th century here, a time when medical science was evolving super fast, but also a time of just extreme contrasting opinions. Dr. Tilden stood totally apart from his peers. He argued that almost everything the medical establishment was doing to heal patients was actually making them sicker, and that society needed a massive wake-up call about health.
Just listen to this quote. His combative, unapologetic tone perfectly captures his mission to totally disrupt the medical status quo. He didn't just disagree with his colleagues, he felt they were actively harming people. He positioned himself squarely against both the heavy-handed drug prescribers of his day and the purely mental faith healers, insisting that the real truth required, quite literally, beating back the ignorance of both extremes.
To make sense of his radical manifesto, we're going to break his philosophy into 5 themes: Dr. Tilden's medical rebellion, the theory of medical monism, healing without drugs or surgery, rethinking common physical ailments, and finally, the mind and healing. Starting with Section 1, Dr. Tilden's medical rebellion and wielding the stuffed club, let's look at the bizarre origins of his publication. You might be wondering, why on earth call a medical journal a stuffed club? Well, Tilden actually named his magazine after a literal stuffed club that an ex-patient used to cure him of a severe bout of mental exhaustion and anxiety. Now, the crazy part is, Tilden had previously used that exact same physical club on that patient to cure his mental aberration. Grateful for the harsh but highly effective wake-up call, Tilden adopted the club as the core metaphor for his whole medical philosophy. He wanted his writing to be a blunt instrument, aggressively beating horse sense into a gullible public and an arrogant medical profession that he thought was just too stubborn to see the truth. That brings us to Section 2, the theory of one root cause. This is the foundational theory that drove all of his shocking medical decisions. The crucial point here is that Tilden believed the entire naming system of diseases should just be completely wiped out. Whether you had tonsillitis, a cold, or even cancer, he argued that every single illness strictly stems from one root cause: a breakdown in the body's nutrition and waste cycles, which he called perverted nutrition. He firmly believed that sickness was simply an accumulation of toxic rot from within the body, all because of bad lifestyle habits. To him, giving symptoms different names only distracted us from fixing the actual problem. And the massive divide in 1900 was just stark. Mainstream doctors were fighting specific invaders with specific pills, heavily medicating fevers, and aggressively feeding patients to keep their strength up. Tilden, conversely, completely rejected pharmaceutical drugs and surgery. He believed that forcing medicine or food into a sick body only worsened that internal toxicity. His approach was entirely holistic, targeting the whole body's natural baseline instead of playing a game of whack-a-mole with isolated symptoms. It's really fascinating that Tilden outright rejected the idea that germs directly cause disease. While the rest of the scientific world was enthusiastically celebrating the discovery of disease-causing bacteria, Tilden completely dismissed it as a dangerous germ craze. He argued that germs only take root if the body's soil is already ruined by a bad lifestyle. To him, the germ wasn't the primary enemy. Your own toxic, weakened internal environment was what actually invited the disease in. Moving right along to Section 3, healing without drugs or surgery. Let's see how this translates into his actual, practical methods for healing. Instead of the popular medicines of the day, which he claimed dangerously inhibited heart action and undermined the nervous system, Tilden stuck to a minimalist, completely non-drug toolkit. He argued that the body heals itself if you just get out of its way. By simply utilizing water, massive amounts of fresh air, total physical rest, and most importantly fasting, he claimed he could cure almost anything without a single pill or scalpel. Surgery to him was just hacking away the external symptoms rather than doing the hard work of fixing the systemic rot inside the patient. So how does this non-drug protocol work for conditions as severe as cancer or typhoid fever? Well, his absolute first step, which deeply horrified his contemporaries, was to immediately stop feeding the patient entirely. The source material documents a remarkable case where he diagnosed a man with a cancerous growth and ordered him to give up his business, clear his mind entirely, and consume absolutely nothing but a little milk or grape juice for an entire year to let nature absorb the tumor. Naturally, other doctors repeatedly accused him of starving patients to death with these extreme methods. But Tilden doubled down. He firmly believed that when a patient is in extreme pain or battling a high fever, the digestive system entirely shuts down. As he brilliantly put it, assimilation goes out on a strike. This meant any food given to a sick person doesn't actually nourish them. It simply sits there in the stomach, rots, and becomes an active poison that further burdens the body. By completely withholding food, he argued he was conserving the body's precious energy so it could fiercely fight the disease.
Let's jump to Section 4, rethinking common physical ailments, like the cold and the diet. Because if severe diseases are caused by lifestyle, what about the most common illness of all?
Think about this for a second. While mainstream doctors confidently blamed drafts, sudden temperature changes, and damp weather for the common cold, Tilden asked his readers to look at a much more surprising culprit. He argued that if external weather factors caused colds, then ice house workers or people constantly out in the damp would be sick constantly. But they weren't. His shocking answer? He claimed that a cold was actually an explosion of pewtermine poisoning in the body. To translate that 1900s medical jargon, pewtermine poisoning essentially meant food literally putrefying and rotting in the gut. He believed this was triggered almost entirely by eating way too much food. In fact, he confidently declared that 9/10 of all colds were simply a routine bodily purge caused by the chronic food poisoning habit of the average gluttonous American.
Tilden pointed the finger at specific, everyday habits. He argued that smothering the skin in heavy wool underwear entirely ruined the skin's natural ability to breathe and regulate temperature. Combine that with sleeping in tightly shut, unventilated bedrooms, enduring intense emotional stress, and stuffing the stomach with heavy meats, and you've basically created a massive state of self-poisoning. It was just waiting to erupt into a cold the moment you experienced a slight physical trigger, like a draft.
Finally, Section 5, the mind and healing. Let's explore Tilden's highly sarcastic, but honestly incredibly modern, views on the mind-body connection.
Tilden had absolutely no patience for hysteria, referring to it as a mental drunk. He viewed it as a sheer lack of self-discipline and basic horse sense. He even tells a fantastic anecdote about blatantly refusing to treat a hysterical woman in the middle of the night. He noted that these overly dramatic patients often completely drained the energy of young, sympathetic doctors, who would mistakenly fuel the hysteria with unnecessary medical interventions, attention, and worst of all, unneeded surgeries.
When it came to the booming industry of faith healers, he drew a very hard line. He separated what he called ignorant faith, which is believing you can magically cure a physical sickness just by wishing it away while continuing your terrible habits, from true knowledge-based faith. Knowledge-based faith meant taking uncompromising accountability for your physical transgressions first, fixing your diet and rest, and only then using mental positivity to speed up the body's natural healing process.
He fully acknowledged that mental therapies and a fiercely positive outlook were highly potent for good. But as he firmly pointed out, mental therapies were only effective if the patient stopped outraging nature's laws with their daily habits. You simply can't just think yourself well if you're still overeating, overworking, breathing bad air, and ignoring the fundamental requirements of your body.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Yes, Dr. Tilden was incredibly extreme, aggressively combative, and totally dismissed the life-saving potential of modern germ theory and surgery. But when we look at his intense, unyielding focus on lifestyle, diet, fresh air, and stress reduction, was Dr. Tilden actually a century ahead of his time in demanding we look deeply at our daily habits before immediately reaching for a pill or a scalpel? It's a fascinating look at the very radical roots of non-drug holistic health. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the past, and as always, keep questioning the conventional wisdom.